heard about Dianetics, the #1 self-help bestseller by L. Ron Hubbard.
You've seen the commercials.
Are you using your mind to the fullest?
Touting the benefits of the Church of Scientology.
Clear away your negative feelings and unblock your true potential.
Dianetics? It's amazing.
Stars such as John Travolta and Tom Cruise say that Scientology has changed their lives.
In drug rehabilitation, L. Ron Hubbard discovered the first proven techniques to rid people of the harmful effects of drugs. Using no drugs, his methods have salvaged the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and are used by Narconon, who have the world's best statistical rate of success exclusively using L. Ron Hubbard's technology.
L. Ron Hubbard was given Vistarol by Dr. Gene Denk in his final days by intramuscular injection on the right buttocks. Vistarol is a psychiatric drug used to calm frantic or overly anxious patients. He died on January 24th, 1986, 8 days after a fatal stroke. Reminiscent of the final days of Howard Hughes, Hubbard's fingernails and toenails were long and unkempt. His hair was long, thin, and receding on his forehead.
Considering that Church of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard himself left behind a doped corpse when he left for the next level, it is indeed curious to note that Scientologists are encouraged to be drug-free, and the drug treatment facility he began, Narconon, has been in existence for over 30 years, expanding to over 24 countries and taught in thousands of prisons and schools worldwide.
L. Ron Hubbard was taking a powerful psychopharmaceutical drug when he died, but according to the Scientology scriptures that he composed, evil space aliens control and manipulate Earth's psychiatrists via mental telepathy, and psych drugs are used by these space aliens to control and enslave humanity. This leaves one asking, if Scientology scripture is true, how did the space aliens finally get at Hubbard? Or is there some other explanation for this hypocrisy?
Do you use drugs in any way?
No, never. No drugs.
What do you make of science? I only made it around 200 pages into Dianetics, and my head exploded like I was in a David Cronenberg film. But what do you make of it?
I know that it's about you go into a desert and there's a ship somewhere, and then you sign a huge check, and if you don't, they'll kill you. That's all I really know about it.
Well,
that's about it.
Those are the cliff notes.
Those are the cliff notes right there. When you're in a hurry, you've got to know something quick.
Amidst the flurry of tales, it's difficult to decipher the truth. To really understand Scientology, it's necessary to go back in time to the genesis of the religion and its founder, L. Ron Hubbard. Lafayette Ronald Hubbard was born in 1911 in Tilden, Nebraska. An adventuresome spirit, Hubbard made trips to Guam and China as a teenager, described romantically in his teenage diaries.
You're talking about a young L. Ron Hubbard. You're talking about someone who shot sharks, who scaled erupting volcanoes, who explored the jungles of Asia. I mean, you're talking about Indiana Jones, but for real.
He did some small thing and that just blew up in his own mind. He had a very dangerous imagination. Even when he was 19, he was starting to inhabit a fantasy world.
That fantasy would be put to use in the 1930s, when Hubbard dropped out of college and began to write for a living. Unusually prolific, Hubbard moved to New York and became a popular writer of adventure and science fiction stories. But those who knew him recall that Hubbard had other ambitions.
I knew Ron Hubbard before he ever started Scientology. I was in a writing group with him in Greenwich Village, and he kept saying that, you know, the only way to make any money, you can't do it pub writing. You start a religion. And nobody took him very seriously.
Although he'd like to claim it was from a vision inspired from a near-death experience, it may have been L. Ron's strange relationship with drugs that initiated his first sci-fi fantasy, a book which he believes laid the groundwork for his later philosophical achievements.
But Hubbard's most amazing story was about himself. His literary agent was Forry Ackerman, himself a sci-fi fanatic. One night, deep into the small hours, Hubbard told Ackerman of a bizarre event in a hospital theater. It was an event that would shape his entire life.
He said that he had died on the operating table. And he rose in spirit form, and he looked at the body that he had previously inhabited, and he shrugged the shoulders he didn't have anymore, and he thought, well, then where do we go from here? Off in the distance, he saw a great ornate gate, and it looked kind of interesting to him, so he wafted over to it, and the gate, as they do in supernatural films, just opened without any human assistance. He floated through, and on the other side, he saw an intellectual smorgasbord of everything that had ever puzzled the mind of man. You know, how did it all begin? What is God's purpose? Where do we go from here? Are there past lives? Are there future lives? And like a sponge, he was just absorbing all of this esoteric information. And all of a sudden, there was kind of a swishing in the air, and he heard a voice, no, not yet, he's not ready. And like a long umbilical cord, he felt himself being pulled back, and he lay down in his body, and he opened his eyes, and he said to the nurse, I was dead, wasn't I? Then he bounded off the operating table. I don't know how you die, and the next minute you're bounding off an operating table. He got 2 reams of paper and a gallon of scalding black coffee. And at the end of 2 days, he had a manuscript called Excalibur, or The Dark Sword. And he told me that whoever read it either went insane or committed suicide. And he said the last time he had shown it to a publisher in New York, he walked into the office to find out what the reaction was. Publisher called for the reader. The reader came with a manuscript, threw it on the table, and threw himself out of the skyscraper window.
But was Hubbard's extraordinary story true? Excalibur became the stuff of mystery. Hubbard told friends it was too dangerous to publish. But 40 years later, a treasure trove from Hubbard's early journals and manuscripts, believed to have been long lost, was discovered by his staff.
There were 2.5 versions of Excalibur. I read them, and I didn't go mad and didn't die. They also include the information within related writings that these came out of a nitrous oxide incident. Hubbard had a couple of teeth extracted, and it was while under the effect of nitrous oxide that he came up with Excalibur.
Hubbard's death was in fact an hallucination under the effects of anesthetic. So what was the intellectual dish he'd fed on?
It's not particularly revolutionary. The key to Excalibur was this great realization by Hubbard of survive as being the one command that all existence and all life and all people have. That became the basis for a lot of Dianetics and a lot of Scientology.
This idea had a profound impact on Hubbard. In a letter to Polly, he wrote, I have high hopes of smashing my name into history so violently that it will take a legendary form.
Sometime after allegedly trying to bilk the Navy out of permanent disability funds for ulcers he developed while in naval service, Hubbard met and befriended pioneering rocketeer and occultist Jack Parsons. Besides being one of the founders of Caltech, Jack Parsons had the dubious honor of being the only pothead with a crater on the moon named after him.
Hubbard and Parsons shared adventurous and creative spirits. The two apparently shared another fascination, that being a taste for the occult works of Aleister Crowley, the English magician who fancied himself the Beast 666 of the Book of Revelation.
In 1945, after a 4-year stint in the Navy, Hubbard became involved in ritual magic with a protege of British Satanist Aleister Crowley.